Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, your home for deer hunting news, stories, and strategies. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kenyon, and this is episode number 19. Today we're joined by Jim Shockey, one of the most legendary figures in the world of hunting. The topic of our conversation? Hunting northern whitetails. This is an awesome conversation, so get pumped, get set, and let's go. All right, welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. With me this afternoon is my co-host, Dan Johnson, and joining us is our very special guest today, Jim Shockey. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're thrilled to have you joining us, and I know you've got a lot going on this time of year, so it means a lot. And how are you this afternoon?
I'm actually good because I'm at home. Anytime I'm at home, I'm a pretty happy camper, kind of the opposite of everybody else on the planet that likes to go camping. And I'm pretty happy to be at home for a few days a year.
That is nice. I imagine that you are gone a ton, so I can see why that would be really nice. Now, for most of our listeners, Jim, I'm sure you don't need an introduction. You're one of the most renowned big game outfitters in the world, and your television shows have been some of the most highly acclaimed in outdoor television history, really. But with that said, we always like to learn a little bit something new about every one of our guests. So I was hoping, if you don't mind, if you could share just a little bit about maybe how you got started in the industry in outfitting, and maybe how you got to this point that you're at now today.
Sure. Yeah, I can tell you exactly when it was. Louisa and I were just married in 1984 in November, and so 1985 sort of. By June, she was actually, we had our first son, Brandon, on the way. So she has morning sick, and I had a lot of time on my hands. And I thought, if I have all this time, this would be when I should try writing. I mean, I grew up reading Jack O'Connor and Outdoor Life and Peterson's hunting magazines, and I thought I'd try my hand at writing, since really there wasn't much else going on around our house at that point. So I wrote my first article back then, and that's really how I started into the hunting industry. So that would be 30 years ago now.
Wow. And since then, from the writing side of things, how did you take that next step into outfitting and then eventually TV? Was that by chance, or did you plan that? How did that happen?
That was kind of both. The writing was going quite well. I was mostly writing up in Canada at that time, but then Tony Knight with Knight Muzzleloading, he saw my writing and saw that I was using a muzzleloader quite a bit, and so he contacted me and invited me down to a couple of industry hunts where he met like really fancy guys, famous to me, like Judd Cooney and Jim Zumbo. At that point, it was Bill Jordan was around there, Larry Weishu, and they're all in that one hunt. So that started me into the American side of things. Like I say, Tony introduced me to everybody, and I got to start writing for the American magazines. At that point, I knew I was going to make a living in the hunting industry. I just didn't know what that might be. I mean, I still had my antique businesses going at that time, buying and selling antique furniture, refinishing it. So I just didn't know if I'd be selling outdoor T-shirts or if I'd be outfitting. When I finally crunched a few numbers, I realized there wasn't a bunch of money in T-shirts for me, but in outfitting, I could make a living. So I bought my first outfitting territory. I remember my wife and I had a long conversation with her. This was 1992 at that time, 1992, and we mortgaged our house through the hilt, bored every penny I could, and bought my first outfitting territory in Vancouver Island. Because I was already in the writing world, the manufacturers pretty much knew who I was, and anyone with a television show knew who I was. I remember Mark LaBarbera from the North American Hunter magazine and their television show by the same name contacted me and asked if I would, take them out on a hunt, and they were going to film it for ESPN. And that was my filming debut. So that was the luck part of it. After that, once that show aired, a lot of the other television people at that time, which there weren't a lot of them, it was a pretty small world, they most of them contacted me over time, and would I guide them and take them on a hunt in my territory. And because I was in front of the camera so much, it sort of became second nature. I actually worked with Bill Jordan and David Blanton and the guys at Realty Outdoors for 5 years on TNN, and then started my own show in '93 was the first year it aired. No, 2003. I'm 10 years out. So it was kind of a little bit of luck, right place, right time, with the right product, and a lot of really good teachers mentoring me as I came up through the ranks.
That's awesome. Yeah, it seems like in so many cases it's we're blessed with good people to help us, and many of these different opportunities come because of that. So that's pretty neat to hear. Now, speaking of your television shows, before we start diving into Whitetails, which is what I really wanted to focus on today, I do know that you've got a new project that you just started this summer, and that is your new show, Uncharted. So that said, could you fill us in a little bit about, what Uncharted is all about and why this project is something that you're so excited about?
Sure, yeah. It's actually a co-production between ourselves and the Outdoor Channel. And it's one of, if not the first, 1 hour outdoor program, airing, I think, 5 times a week. So, the Outdoor Channel's invested a lot of time and effort, and dollars into this project. So from the production side, the production values are higher than we've ever attained with any of our previous shows. And with an hour long, we get to now tell the story. A lot of the storyline we had to leave on the edit room floor in exchange for almost a montagey music video type feel to the TV shows. Half an hour when you take out all the commercials and take out the intro and take out the thanks at the end and credits and whatnot, you end up with about 17 minutes. And that's not a lot to tell a story. So now with an hour, we can actually tell a story a lot better on the characterization. We can spend more time on that. We can talk a little bit more about what hunting means. Now it's not as fast-paced as what some of the guys will be used to, but now you get to sit there for an hour and enjoy this program. And we're all over the world, into the uncharted regions of the world, which for us, can be pretty uncharted. I mean, we're in Papua New Guinea. I think that already aired, and we're off the west coast of British Columbia on some unknown salmon streams, and Kyrgyzstan, I believe, is airing right now. Then we'll be off in Pakistan and up to the Arctic with the Inuit. We've already filmed in Paraguay. I think I mentioned that just when you and I were talking before the program. And I'm off to Russia right now in the Caucasus Mountains for the next bit of filming, and we've got scheduled in places like Morocco and Liberia, which right now with the Ebola outbreak it may have to be revisited, but it's
yeah,
for us, Uncharted is pretty wild places, and we're but that's on the surface. That's the locations. The actual Uncharted is more about expanding your own or pushing back your own envelope. Whoever you are, wherever you are, if you're a hunter, maybe it's going out in the dark in the back 40 for somebody. That's uncharted territory for them, and that's more what the show is about. It's hopefully inspirational to all outdoors people.
I love that kind of philosophical angle on the more mental or spiritual side of what Uncharted means when it comes to hunting. I think, Dan and I talk about this a lot, that there's a lot more to it than just a place or a kill. There's a whole lot of memories and experiences and learning lessons that all kind of factor into it. So that's awesome. From everything I've seen, Uncharted looks incredible, and from everyone I've talked to, there's been just rave reviews. So I'm excited to see what the rest of the season has to offer too. But
yeah, we're hopefully it's gonna resonate with all the viewers. I mean, that'll be the most important. We'll see. I mean, I have high hopes. I truly believe, like you're saying, that all hunters know that it's not just about a kill. It's not just about the size of the animal. so much more to hunting. Family, humor, adventure, culture. That's the most important parts of hunting. The actual animal is the nice bonus, and that's what makes it hunting. But it's absolutely spiritual. The outdoors is our cathedral.
Yep, I couldn't say it any better myself. Now, with that all said, though, I guess kind of taking a slight right turn, I did want to make sure while we have you to kind of pick your brain a little bit about what we really focus here on Wired to Hunt about, and that's whitetails. Mm-hmm. And I know you run a major whitetail outfitting business in Saskatchewan, and I've seen you do a lot of hunting for whitetails across the northern part of the United States or North America and Canada. So with that in mind, my thought today was that we could chat with you a little bit about specifically hunting big northern whitetails. That seems like it's something that you kind of specialize in. So to kick things off, Jim, for those of us down here in the Midwest or in the southern U.S. that might not know, is there really a difference between our deer down here in the South and the deer up north in Canada? And if so, how?
Oh, no question. I mean, morphologically, you get a big Saskatchewan whitetail buck, a big bush buck. They'll weigh 300 pounds, and we've actually weighed them upwards of 350.
Wow.
And the mass on those deer is all in the front end. They literally look like a bull coming through the forest. They're just so built up on the front end. And you don't see that in any of the southern deer. The southern deer, with all due respect, are really pretty. I mean, they're gorgeous. They have, beautiful, racks and long tines. They're really pretty. Our bucks up in the north are actually kind of ugly. Again, with all due respect to any whitetail bucks that are listening to the podcast.
Yeah.
The other thing is the antlers up north. Like I'm sitting in my office right now looking at probably 20 mounts and European mounts of my biggest bucks I've ever taken, and they're all pretty nasty looking bucks. I mean, to try and find a really typical, nice, clean 5x5 is not that easy. I've taken many in the 180s. My highest is in the 190s, and many more in the 170s. And only one of those has ever netted Boone and Crockett, 170. And it's really the only clean, perfect 5x5 I've ever taken. They're just not that common. So we, again, morphologically, body's bigger. Antler-wise, they're heavier. They doesn't show up in the score because mass doesn't amount for much on the Boone and Crockett or SCI scoring. Mm-hmm. Mass is the least important. So our bucks grow the antler mass, but that doesn't count for much. So they look great if you like big, gnarly looking, nasty racks. So I'd say those are the two biggest differences, just the way the racks look and the body size of our deer in the north.
Yeah. I from what I've seen on videos and photographs and stuff, that seems to kind of sync up with what I've seen. Now, another thing I'm curious about. My wife always likes to give me a hard time about the fact that when I go up into northern Michigan and I kill a deer up there, she claims they taste and they smell bad compared to the deer that I killed down in southern Michigan or a different part of the country that's feeding on corn and beans and whatnot. How do the bucks up in Canada taste?
They taste great. I mean, I would defy anybody to show me a steak served in the fanciest restaurant in New York City that's any better than a good venison steak from a northern buck. I don't, deer, to me, deer are deer. They taste pretty good no matter where they're from. And these obviously are not corn-fed for the most part up in northern Saskatchewan. But so maybe you might want to revisit your wife, the message she's trying to give you. Maybe you're traveling too far away from home. You're gone too long to hunt up north. She wants you to hunt closer to home. Who knows? But no, the meat on the I'm speaking for Saskatchewan. I've hunted Alberta extensively and British Columbia as well. I've personally never hunted in Manitoba, but sorry about that. But there's someone trying to reach me in my office right now. No, the deer are great. They taste great. They're excellent. There's not I'd like I say, defy anybody to find a better tasting steak, no matter what the meat. And the fanciest restaurant in the world.
Nice. Well, I'm gonna have to chat with my wife about this and see if she's playing mind games with me. but
She may well be. Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Now, how about how these deer behave? There's a lot of talk down here about certain bucks. Maybe a buck in Iowa where there's less hunting pressure might act and behave differently than a buck in New York State where there's tons of hunting pressure. How do you feel those northern whitetails behave compared to maybe the average deer that most guys are hunting?
Well, I don't think there's any question that the deer in the north, northwest of Canada, have very, very little hunting pressure compared to other parts of North America. So they don't we don't use tree stands. I mean, I've probably killed one buck in a tree stand in my life up in Canada, one that I can remember, maybe two. I think I stayed in a windmill one time. So we don't have to go up in trees. Our bucks don't. I've seen those ones down south. I hunted down in Kentucky. They were walking in, looking up. I mean, I've never seen that in Saskatchewan deer. The deer down there just are so much more switched on. A lot of our deer have never seen a human being before. They'll walk right in. They move around diurnally. They're not nocturnal. They can get nocturnal more certainly. Again, dependent on the weather. If it's hot weather, they'll move around at night when it's cooler, but it's not because of hunting pressure for the most part. So I would say, on a scale of 1 to 10, where those southern bucks are pushed and hunted hard, they're a 9 and a 10 out of 10. Ours are more like a 2 to a 4 out of 10. Now that there is certain deer. If you're looking for one particular buck, they're still not easy to get. You've got to be right place, right time. And if he's hooked up with a doe, you're not going to see him during the day for X amount of days. And, then say he travels through your area, picks up a doe in another part where you're not hunting, he might not see him for another few days. So they're not easy to get, but they're certainly not sophisticated, relatively speaking. That's my opinion. I'm sure that, some of my peers up here in Canada would be, calling in right now with nasty comments, but they're in my experience, they're definitely not as switched on as the southern deer. They're easier to hunt.
Interesting. What do you think about all this, Dan? Coming from an Iowa perspective, what kind of questions do you have about this for Jim?
Well, I just wish that the deer that I hunted had never seen a human before. Unfortunately, that's not the case. But as far as I'd like to go ask you kind of a broader question. You've hunted several different species of animals in several different locations throughout the entire world. My question to you is there a similarity or a tactic or strategy that you could relate to whitetail hunting that all these animals have?
That's a funny. It's kind of a good question. And by the way, I've taken several other species around the world. I think it's been about 310 different other species, just for the record. so yeah, I've done a little bit of hunting around the world. What's interesting? That I will sit for 20 days waiting for a particular whitetail buck, and turn down everything waiting for that buck, and be happy if I don't get a buck that season. No problem. And I'll sit dawn till dark every day, in the cold Saskatchewan weather, and love every second of it. That same tactic will work on any animal in any place around the world, but we never use it because it's just white-tailed deer somehow, they're magical. They're wonderful. They're what we all grew up hunting. It's the number one big game animal on the planet, and we all of us, I guess, cut our big game hunting teeth on whitetail deer, most of us. So they hold a special place in our heart, and we will sit, we will wait, we will hunt them day after day after day, waiting quietly, silently. Internationally, that doesn't happen so much. I get. It's tough to sit on a stand in the Congo waiting for a black-fronted diker for 2 days straight. I mean, you go nuts. Well, the 20 days straight on a whitetail will be filled every second of the day. And I don't know what that is. It's I guess it's just the spell that whitetails cast over us as hunters, compared to anything else on the planet. So mostly around the world, it's spot and stalk. Like red stag over in Asia, you might do a little, try calling them, but it's still, for the most part, it's spot and stalk, and a few instances where you'll still hunt, sneaking through trying to get a shot at them, and even fewer instances where you'll actually sit patiently and wait for an animal day after day after day. And maybe it's a function of, you're not over there for as many days as you are. The season here is, 3 months? Well, most of us are around for 3 months. We might only get, weekends off, but we still can go back, and you kind of want it to be over, but you kind of also don't want it to be over.
Yeah.
But when you're international, you really kind of want to get that animal, and because it's not that easy to get back to those places. So it's not like you fail to get the animal and then come back in 2 weeks for another weekend. I mean, it's a major effort just to get there. So it's a little different focus on, maybe a little higher value placed on getting the animal as opposed to whitetails where it's just hunting the animal. So yeah, the practices would apply internationally, but the most efficacious way of killing a whitetail is sitting still and waiting. That's not something we use internationally as much as one would expect.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Very interesting.
And I'm curious, given what you just said about the kind of unique relationship you have with whitetail hunting compared to most everything else you're doing, would you say that whitetail hunting is your favorite game to hunt, or is it something else?
Yeah, that's a question that I've been asked before. Here's how I'm going to couch it. My favorite big game animal to hunt in the world is moose. It's moose, and particularly Alaskan Yukon moose up in the Yukon during the rut. The start of the rut in September. That's my favorite big game animal to hunt in the world. Now, if you just repose the question and ask me, if you could only hunt one big game animal for the rest of your life, what would it be? That's a different answer for me. It would be white-tailed deer, and I love hunting moose, and I'll hunt them as long as I can. But if you took everything away and I could only hunt one animal, it would be white-tailed deer. Again, I think it's a lot of our value system as hunters is based on hunting deer. That's what we've learned on. That's our skill set. We all cut our teeth on white-tailed deer, and I've been hunting them since I was 14 years of age. I got my first one. I mean, thinking about that's 42 years ago. That's a long time ago. But I certainly wasn't hunting moose back then. I think I was 16 before I went on my first hunt, and many years when I didn't hunt moose through my 20s, but I always hunted white-tailed deer, and I always hoped to be able to hunt white-tailed deer. I mean, my dad, got his last deer in 2012. And he was 85 years old, 86.
Wow.
And didn't make it till his 87th birthday, just missed the season by a year this past year. But I mean, he hunted right until literally the last year of his life. It'd be tough to do that with moose, but you can absolutely do it with whitetail as long as, you have family members that'll sort of take you out there and help you out a little bit. So yeah, whitetail deer, that's the one animal that I would always want to be able to hunt my entire life.
I love it. Yeah, they really do hold a special place in so many people's hearts. They just they get in your head and your heart and your gut, and you can't get rid of them. That's for sure. So.
No, exactly. They're part hunting whitetails, hunters, whitetails, same difference. There's no difference.
Absolutely. So taking a turn back to tactics, kind of. I'm curious when it comes to these Canadian whitetails or northern whitetails in general. What is your go-to tactic? I know that you're helping with your outfitting business, helping a lot of guys get maybe their first northern whitetail. What is it that you're helping these guys do to make these hunts successful?
Well, I mean, the single biggest factor on that neutralizes the skill set or neutralizes the skill level of every hunter is the fact that we can bait up in Saskatchewan. Can't bait in Alberta, can bait in British Columbia. A lot of guys will turn their nose up and say, well, baiting, it's unethical, blah, blah, blah. But it's very difficult to grow a food plot up there. Your growing season maybe 90 days at the most, and it's just such remote country. It's not a practical thing. And up in Canada too, it's not so much private land up in the North Country. We call it crown land. It belongs to the government, which means you can't just go in there and dig up a 2-acre patch and plant some kind of seeds. You can't do that. So it's very carefully controlled what you can bait with, even like no weed seeds, nothing invasive. So I don't disagree in certain situations. Maybe baiting isn't the most ethical if there's other options, but up there, when you're sitting in a forest that's literally millions of square miles with no fences, no nothing between you and the North Pole until you hit the Precambrian shield. I mean, and you're not allowed to build food plots. What options are there? Well, baiting is the one way that you can focus the does in an area, and the bucks will come through. Now they're not necessarily feeding, but they're certainly coming through to check the does. And what it becomes is a pure patience game. Sitting 6 days from dawn till dark on a stand when it's 20 below zero, it takes a lot of desire and a lot of patience, and mental focus. So they're different skill set. Now that's how you make everybody equal in the playing field. Just whoever's got the most perseverance is going to get the biggest deer eventually. I mean, they're going to be on stand when it comes by, barring pure luck. That all said, and I will bait. I mean, I'll put bait out absolutely, but I don't do it because it's the best way for me to personally hunt. It's the way that we can best get the animals on camera coming through the woods, seeing what they do all day long, and it's beautiful to see. It's like catch and release. It's a true catch and release form of hunting. You can bring them in, you can look at them. I'm not going to shoot them, let them walk away. Catch and release, and you can enjoy the day. As a deer doing what they're doing in front of you. The better way to kill a big buck, and this is any big buck, and I truly believe that if I know that a certain set of tracks is made by a big buck and there's fresh snow on the ground, I'll kill a deer. I'll kill it. It's just, I'll track it down and I will kill it. Pure and simple, I will get that deer. It makes for real crappy television footage, nothing to share with anybody because you'll see glimpses, bits and pieces, and a patch of hair, there's antlers, yeah, boom, and shot goes off, and it makes for lousy footage, but it's a darn good way, an effective way to hunt, the best way. I will kill that deer. At the end of that set of tracks, there's the deer that I'm trying to kill. I'll get him. By the same token, rattling works really well. Still hunting, a combination of stand hunting, standing meaning literally standing, sitting on a stump somewhere, combined with moving through the forest, carefully still hunting. That family does it in Michigan. What's their names? I think it'll come to me, but the Deloitte,
Benoit, or
yeah, that's right, Benoit. Yeah,
Benoit, yes.
It. Yeah, they do it. They still hunt, and they get the flash shots of the animals. Fantastic way to hunt. Really challenging. And if you combine rattling, still hunting, a little bit of stand hunting, and tracking, I mean, it's a better way to get a big deer and get an individual big deer, as long as you know that deer made those tracks. So yeah, there's other ways to do it up there, but the most efficient way for the average hunter is to come up and sit down on stand and just enjoy the days as the deer come in, and again, it's tightly controlled. They're only allowed so much bait on the stand, but that honestly is the best way to get the deer up in that big bush country. Or you can sit on a scrape. If you don't want to use bait, that's fine too. That's everybody's choice. You can sit on a scrape, and a buck will come in eventually, and that's also a good way to do it. You're just not going to enjoy the day as much. There's no does around to watch, no younger bucks.
When is the northern rut? Is that early November, late October as well, or is it even earlier than that?
No, it's later. It's
later.
I've always felt that the November 21st was the peak of the rut for whitetails, and November 11th is really the serious start of the rut, and the 30th is the end of the rut. Now there is, you can rattle them in before the rut for sure, in late October, early November particularly, and you can, get them still doing some rutting activity after December 30th, depending on the year, depending on what the moon's doing. But the peak of the rut would be the 21st of November, based on, my 4 decades of hunting them up in the north.
Well, that's interesting. That's really interesting, because the further you get into the south, you get into the northern hemisphere. It seems like the rut gets later and later and later, and then you get way south, and it's like in December or January. So that's just almost contradicting science, or some of that light is part of the breeding cycle, the amount of light there is in a day.
And one thing, and Jim, correct me.
Well, I guess it's relative to the, maybe our deer just have a different circadian number in their head. Maybe they, when they hit 8.5 hours of daylight, that's when they start to run. I don't know. Hard to say.
Yeah, one thing I think I've heard somewhere, and I think it makes biological sense, is that the farther north you get, those deer are going to be experiencing winters that last later. And so in order for their fawns to survive, they need those fawns being dropped later in the spring. So I think that might have something to do with the fact that, deer are breeding later in northern Canada, because, if they breed, late October and they're dropping their fawns when there's 2 feet of snow still, that's not going to be, a great situation. So I think there might be something to do with that. But I guess that's just...
Yep. Yeah, no, I'm sure that's reverse behavioral evolution. I guess any deer that had their fawns earlier in February and March, they died. They were selected out. So that would absolutely make sense.
Yeah. So something you said a few minutes ago, Jim, really caught my attention, and it's something that we haven't really talked much about here on the podcast. So I'd really like to pick your brain about it, and that is tracking. I know, like you said, there's some people that still, are really big on still hunting and tracking, especially in the northern part of the country. I know in Maine that's a really big thing, in some of the Northeast. But can you give us a quick rundown of how you go about tracking and killing a whitetail like that? Because that's something that in the Midwest here, it's not really one of those really popular tactics. But I think a lot of people would be, really interested to hear your take on that.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. The first key to it is you've got to have enough land that you can do it on without bumping into a border fence that you can't, leave that fence or leave that fenced area. Say you have 300 acres. It's a lot better to have 2 square miles, 2 sections that you can hunt in. You need a big enough chunk of forest that you can get yourself into the forest and then stop and let sort of get with the flow of the forest, right? If it's too small a patch of brush or bush, you enter it into everything that was in that bush knows you entered, right? So you need a big enough patch that if animals on the far side of it don't know you're in the bush, and then you sit still and you wait and you let. It's all about moving slowly. One of my mentors that taught me how to hunt whitetails was what I call them jumpers. Was Pete Manziak. Peter's passed away now, but he told me, Jimmy, wear every piece of clothing you brought with you. This is every piece of clothing. It's designed for 40 below weather. Plus, when I put even more layers on, I'm going to be cooking. and he said that'll make you move slow enough in the bush, because if you go any faster, you'll start to sweat. So literally, for me, it's I'll get into the bush as quietly, as slowly as I can, say 100 yards into the timber. Then I'll sit still. I'll sit for an hour. Just wait. And what happens, you'll start to, the birds will start to come back. The squirrels will start to come out. The nature gets back into its rhythm. It's like, imagine a pool that you throw a rock into. It has ripples all over it. Eventually it calms off and everything's back to normal again. Yeah. So that's what you have to do first. Then what I do when I'm really seriously still hunting for a big buck, I'll take one step and I'll raise my binos very slowly and I'll look with my binos in the forest. A lot of people don't do that. You have to use your binoculars because it's the only way that our eyes start to be even competitive with the deer's eyes, or deer's eyesight. So So I take one step, I look with my scan the entire forest, looking for little notches between the trees. I'll focus my focus ring on the bino back and forth to give me depth of field. Then I'll put the bino, and this is slowly. It's not lift them up quickly looking. No, this is all slowly. Then I'll take 2 steps and watching, feeling beneath my feet. I'll use moccasin rubbers, like the rubber moccasins with a big wool sock. So I can feel every branch underneath me, every twig. I know if I'm going to break something, I step aside, I move it, feel it. 2 steps, then I look with my binos again. Put it down, 1 step. And now this, you do that, it'll take you hours to go 400 yards through a forest. And remember, the deer are moving too, hopefully. And if not, if they're bedded, you'll be moving in closer to them. If you're going slow enough, you'll be able to walk right in on them. My goal, if the conditions are right, again, the conditions are key. And as I'll just, before I get to my goal, I'll tell you an example. When you're in an aspen forest, say the deer are in aspens or poplars, we call them in the north. Mm-hmm. After the first hard frost, the leaves all turn yellow. Right now, the first wind, the leaves start falling out of the trees, and they're dry, they're crispy, so they're making noise. Right, and they're blowing across the ground, they're making noise, and all those leaves falling down through the trees on a hard wind day after the first hard frost. I don't care what deer it is, you can sneak up on it. I don't care how smart it is. I don't care where it's hiding. You can sneak up on it. And my goal has always been to sneak up close enough to touch one that's better without it knowing I'm there. I've come close enough where I almost can reach my arrow out and touch it, but I could never reach it with my hand. And that's therein lies the key to the success of still hunting is conditions. If it's real crunchy conditions where it seems like you're walking on snowflakes, then why bother? The deer are going to hear you long before you get close enough. It's not a day to still hunt. But if the snow melts a little bit so it's soft and you can walk quietly, then that's a day to still hunt. The day with the crunchy snow is a day to rattle or stand hunt. So it's not about forcing a particular hunting style upon the conditions. It's more adapt to the conditions and use the hunting style that's best suited for that day. So anyway, there you go. It's a long, slow hunting day. It's and believe me, you are drained at the end of the day because you haven't gone anywhere, but you've glassed within every single little tiny opening you can see through it. Like there's little gaps, little shooting lanes that might be 100 yards back in there where you swear you can only see 20, 30 yards. And the deer, you'll see them moving in there, and you can get right among them as they're feeding in the forest, as they're bedded. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing, and it is by far the best, to me, most gratifying way to hunt.
Wow. I know you said it would make awful film, but I sure would love to see you on a hunt like that. That sounds pretty fascinating.
Heck yeah.
Now, you know what the ratings would be if you watched me for an hour, taking one step every 2 minutes, and that would be great. I'll pass that on to the Outdoor Channel and see if they want a show like that.
Yeah, they
call it the snooze hour.
They might not like that idea too much, huh?
Not too much. No, I think you need to be a little faster paced these days.
Yeah. Now, let's say if you're on a hunt like that and you cut a big track, if you find that big track, do you start speeding up to try to catch up to that deer, or are you still inching along? What happens when you actually get that sign that, hey, there was a big buck here recently? What happens next?
Yep. Okay, well, as long as the snow conditions are right? If there's some way that you can tell that track is fresh, if the snow's been the same as it has been for weeks, and there's, it's really hard. There's just tracks everywhere. It's hard to tell what's new. Fresh snow, or say melting snow, that you can tell the age of the track is really important. So once I've determined that the track is a fresh track, then you start looking at the track itself. Is it a buck or is it a doe? It's really easy to tell. I mean, the buck tracks are huge. If it's a really big deer, and like I say, in Saskatchewan, you'll get a 300-pound deer like nothing, a buck, and the does won't be anywhere near that big, 150 pounds, I mean, max. So the doe is not going to have as big a footprints. So that's the first thing you look at. Then I look at, and this is really important, is the length of the stride and the breadth of the chest of the deer. So the breadth of the chest, if it's 9 inches across, that's big. You know, a doe might have tracks that are 4, 5, 6 inches max between them, you know, width across the chest. You know, a big buck, they're massive in the front end. So you can tell right away if that's a buck by the breadth of the track or the width of it, and not only the size of it, but then also the length of the stride. You got to remember, a big animal that's 300, 350 pounds is going to have a longer stride than a smaller animal. So you can tell when those deer have a, you know, 10, 12 feet between, you know, where you can see all 4 of their tracks, and you know it's just walking, but it's just a stride that's much longer stride. You know it's a big animal. You know, you still don't know what the antlers are, but at least you know you're on a buck track. And the other thing too, if it's in the rut, you'll see you can actually feel that if you let yourself just like tune in to what you're looking at, you'll see that buck as he's almost swaggering, like a big buck will come in through the forest. He is the king of the forest, and they won't even deign to lift their feet up. They'll drag their hooves through the snow. You'll see the drag marks, and they're just swaggering. You know, like they're tough bullies looking for a fight or looking for love, but they're definitely behaving like strutting studs, basically. So you can see that from the track. That's another way you can tell it's a buck, is the drag marks of the hoofs in the snow. Then you start following that. I would immediately start following. Forget the one to 2 steps every 5 minutes. You get on that track, because now you know it's fresh. He's somewhere ahead of you. More than likely he's bedded, right? That's the key. Is more than likely he's bedded, because that's the only way you're going to catch up to him.
Right.
He's going to walk all day and all night. You'll never catch up to him. But they never do that. They always bed for a while. Where I found the track isn't a bedding looking area. If it's kind of wide open forest, or again, it's something you start to learn once you've tracked so many deer, or followed so many deer. This isn't where they bed. They don't bed here. It doesn't feel right. They're going. He's going somewhere else, checking for does. So if he's going somewhere else, I can go somewhere else. So I start following fairly quickly. Right? But the instant I get a sense that, wait a minute, he's starting to wander in his tracks a little bit. Right? Again, you just imagine you're that out. What's he doing right now? He's nibbling on food. Okay, if he's nibbling on food, he's not intent on getting anywhere else quickly.
Yeah.
So that means time to slow down. Right? Now, and then as the foliage changes, or the trees, the plants, the type of trees, even the terrain, maybe starts to get a little bit hillier. Well, now you're starting to talk about a place, maybe more saplings. This is more like a bedding area, and you'll feel it once you've tracked enough deer. You'll know, hey, I'm getting close to a bedding area. He's been wandering tracks a little bit. He's not cruising anymore. The tracks were made this morning. He's bedded right in here somewhere ahead of me. Now you got to get close enough to kill him, and that's where you stop back or drop back to the one step. And glass ahead of you, everywhere around you. Put them down slowly, move ahead, and glass again. The biggest problem will be what happens when you hit brush that's too thick that it's brushing against you so much, and it's making noise. You got to be wearing fleeces is the best, or wool. Again, if you can wear white in the snow, is perfect. In Saskatchewan, when you're rifle hunting, you have to wear white in rifle season, or orange or red. Well, wear white with a red cap. They can't see the white against the snow on the trees. Just look like it's almost perfect camo. Snow camo is even better, but it's not allowed in rifle season. Huh. So then you just move in so closely, and if you have to, you grunt. Like I'll make a gross sound here on the phone. Listen. That's just like a pig snort.
Uh-huh.
I can do that with my mouth. I don't have to have a call of any description. Sorry, Will Primos. But you can actually do it with your mouth. You don't have to worry about a reed freezing up in the cold northern air. You can do it with your mouth, and if you do that, just you sound like a young buck coming through the forest, and the deer they'll listen. Right? You'll get their attention. They're going to hear you moving anyway, and you've got fleeces on, so they don't hear that rustling like normal clothes. And then you have a set of antlers in there that you just rake a sapling a little bit. Just rake it. you've made the sound of a buck grunting. You've made the sound of a buck raking his antlers. They will accept the sound of something approaching, and they won't leave. They'll stand there. So anyway, these are all my top secrets for hunting. I'm hoping that you guys don't have millions of viewers. Otherwise, there's going to be a lot of big dead deer this year.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Anyway, that's all. And if I get a little passionate about it, it's because I love it. I love it. I mean, like I say, whitetails are the one animal I'll hunt for the rest of my life, if I can, God willing.
Yeah.
So these are all things that I've learned over the years and applied them, and they work.
This is awesome. No, that was one of the most interesting explanations of a hunting strategy we've heard yet on the podcast. Over 19 episodes. That was awesome. I want to go out there and start tracking some whitetails myself. Although the 40 acres back on my back 40 here probably wouldn't be able to track too far. But
that's and therein lies the one problem with tracking. You got to be able to go for miles if necessary to stay on their track. If you got 40 acres, they'll stand on the other side of the fence on your neighbor's land and stick their tongue out at you. So you got to have the space.
Yeah, absolutely. So I love your passionate descriptions of what you were doing there and how you were tracking deer. So it makes me think of another question being, what is your most memorable whitetail hunt? I would love to hear that story because you are one heck of a storyteller.
Well, I appreciate that. Thanks for the compliment. I'm passionate about it, so it's pretty easy to tell a story when you're passionate about something. For me, there's three hunts come to mind. Brandlin's first buck and Eva's first buck. Those are first whitetail deer. I mean, those both. And for Eva, it wasn't even her first whitetail buck. It was more her first. It was her first Saskatchewan whitetail buck. Because again, I grew up out in Saskatchewan, and to be there with her when she got her first deer, it was fabulous. I mean, there's nothing like it. And anyone that's got children out there that they've hunted with or looking forward to hunt with will know what I'm talking about. It doesn't get better than that. Then, my own first whitetail when I was 14 years of age. I'm looking at the rack right now here in my office. I'm literally looking at the rack. I can tell you exactly everything about it. I mean, that's as if it was yesterday.
So how did it happen? That first deer for Jim Shockey.
Well, it was my father and his brothers were all, my uncles were meat hunters. So whitetail deer hunting was about going out and getting meat for the freezer. If you could go out opening morning of whitetail season and everybody kills their deer that morning and they're back at work at noon, that was the best whitetail season ever. I wasn't quite, somehow I was born under some different star, I guess. I don't know. But for me, it didn't make sense. I always wanted things to last. But my whitetail deer was kind of like that. It was opening morning. I was driving with my dad and two of my uncles in Saskatchewan. And they used to push bush, it's called, which basically deer drives, and road hunt, essentially road hunt. I mean, in those days, that's what they did. And, who was I to tell them I was 14 years of age? Right. I had my 303 British, sporterized 303 British, and I remember we were driving along first light, and out in the field was a buck following about 4 does. So they slammed on the brakes, and I've been on many hunts with my dad and his brothers, and I knew the routine. You bail out and crank a shell in or load it up because you're not allowed to have one in the magazine, and then everybody starts shooting at the deer. Well, in this case, we all bailed out, and I cranked a shell into my gun and started popping away at these deer. Well, I actually took one shot and the deer dropped, and
wow. And
I mean, it was my first. I didn't know. I mean, I didn't know enough about it. I actually turned around and I said to my dad, "Who hit him?" I didn't know. And when I looked around, my dad and my two uncles didn't have their guns. I was the only one holding a gun. So that was my first. It wasn't exactly like I would have wanted it to be. Now knowing what I know after 40 more years of hunting them, and how Eva and Brand got their first deer, but. What? It was my first deer, and it's a cherished memory. And it was maybe again not the most ethical way to hunt, but it was my first deer. And I did get him on the run, and and I was the only one that shot. So, and by the way, my uncles, somehow not one of them helped me with the gutting of that deer. And it was about 20 below, and I had to figure it out by myself. Yeah, so there was the downside to that, getting that first deer.
Yeah, so you really had to work for that one. What was that feeling like when you walked up on your first deer kill ever? Was it shock? Were you just excited or sad? What were those first moments like?
You know what? I can tell you absolutely. It was exactly the same feeling that I get today. You're excited. You walk up and just, wow, like this. You just want to get your hands on that animal to hold it, to feel it. It's yours. You now possess it. You know, and it's. I'm sure that's a primal, something primal. That when we had food back when we were cavemen, that was a joyous feeling. That was joy. It meant we were going to survive for another day, another week, another month, maybe. Our family was going to survive. So when it's literally that innate in us, if any hunter will know, you walk up to that animal, it's like it's an overwhelming feeling of joy. It's not an adrenaline. It's not it's joy when you're walking up, when you get your hands on it. And then it turns for me, it was almost a melancholy, and it still is to this day. It's a melancholy. I just took the life of this animal, and it's one less animal in this world, which again is probably a very natural thing for us to as hunters.
Yeah.
We just predated on one of the animals we're trying to predate on. Well, now there's one less. It means it's going to be that much harder next time. There's less animals to hunt. So it's a melancholy and a sadness almost that comes over you, and almost a regret. And that's the part I don't quite understand. Maybe that's where we're more civilized nowadays. I don't know, because I can't talk to my antecedents from 1,000 years ago to know what they felt. But it's almost a regret for me that, wow, the season's over. All the effort I put in, all the anticipation, the preparation, the practicing, the scouting, whatever I was doing ahead of the season, anticipating the season, it's all over. And the reason I did all that is now over. And my season's done. And it won't be until next year that I get to do this again. So that, like I say, that may be the civilized part, is the regret. Because our ancestors didn't have to worry about that. They would, I'm sure, feel a little sadness that this animal's dead, and then they would just go, okay, what's next? We got to butcher it. Let's get on with life here. Yeah. Somebody watch out for the dire wolves and the cave bears, because they're coming, right? Where we don't have to worry about that. Now we have the luxury in our modern civilization of feeling a pang of regret that everything we worked for is now over. I guess like an Olympic athlete, race is over, won the gold medal. Now what? What's next? It's next Olympics is 4 years away. So for hunting, it's next season. Now, some places, obviously, they get to shoot more than one deer a season. That's not the case in North in Canada.
Yeah, it's a very interesting and strange combination of emotions that I think all hunters can relate to. And it's also one of those things, I think, it's always interesting to hear another hunter describe how they feel. And I think I can relate a lot to what you're saying there, Jim. But it's something that's so hard to describe to someone who's never experienced it. I think in a lot of cases, they just can't really wrap their heads around that. It's quite an experience.
Yeah, it is. And it's, it's what makes us human. And I feel sorry for everyone that doesn't hunt, that doesn't get to feel that deep, innate, spiritual, what would it be? Like friendship.
It's almost like a calling.
Yeah, it's exactly right. It's like a calling. It's a partaking of something that people that don't hunt can't ever experience. And I don't care what they say. You can jump out of all the airplanes you want. You can ski down Mount Everest if that's what you get your tickles from that. You can dive with sharks with naked. It's still nothing compares to the innate, that overwhelming sense of we need a new word. Think of a new word. It's not joy. It's not spirituality. Maybe it's the closest.
Connection.
Connection. Yeah. Being part of the circle of life. Life begets death begets life. To actually be part of it and not just be a voyeur living on chickens and cows that are growing, however chickens and cows are growing. When you're actually providing for yourself and you kill that animal and you're going to eat that animal, and when you walk up to that animal, it's there's nothing more pure. There's nothing more pure, and it's not adrenaline. It's like you say, it's impossible to describe to somebody who doesn't hunt. And it'd be wonderful if the people that don't hunt would try it. Just try it. Just see what that feeling is, and it's hard to deny it because it's real, it's pure, it's us, it's innate, it's who we are as human beings, and it's when you're truly the most human is when you walk up to that animal. I wish the rest of the world could hunt too. I wish there was enough space and enough animals. Unfortunately, we got to be careful what we wish for sometimes.
Yeah, very true. Well, this is one of my favorite aspects of hunting to talk about. I love talking about this non necessarily tactic or killing focus, but just about everything beneath the surface. It's so deep, and many times the people don't actually talk about it. But that said, we are really coming up on time here. So I know we want to be respectful of your time, Jim. I know you've got a lot going on. So Dan, do you have any final question for Jim before we close things up?
Yeah, you're obviously an advocate for hunting, and you're very passionate about the outdoors and hunting as well. What would you say is your biggest takeaway from this sport over all the years you've done it?
I think I would say that it has to be the family orientation of hunters and hunting. I mean, it is truly a family-oriented pastime, and I think that sometimes in today's urbanized world, we, as we leave hunting behind, so many people don't hunt that live in the cities. I think we also leave behind some of the family values that made Canada and the United States of America the greatest countries in the world. It's family is what these nations are built on, and when we forget hunting, we also kind of hand in hand forget family. And I'm sure I'll get a bunch of crappy emails from people in the city saying, "Oh, I love my kid." Yeah, you do. I'm sure you do. And hope they enjoy their week at camp this year. I'm being a little derogatory there. I shouldn't be, but it's it's not the same. The farming culture, agriculture. When you take away the culture out of our lives, what are you left with? Well, you're left with agra. It's not the same anymore. It was. So to me, I think the biggest takeaway is that hunters tend to be family people. They tend to be salt of the earth. They're exactly who I would want, backing me in any kind of a fight. You see it in the military. You see it over and over. The values are there. So hunting is just part of that, part of the value system, I guess, that makes family what it is, why it was so important for these countries, how they developed. And I just would be afraid over time that the more we urbanize, the more we get away from hunting, the more we get away from family and the importance of family. So that would be my takeaway. I'm not sure if that's exactly the answer you're looking for, but the hunting family and family hunting is, again, same thing. We're tied inextricably together.
Yeah, I love that, and I think it's such a great reminder too, because as hunters, especially today, there's such a focus. In some cases, there's such a focus on killing a certain type of animal or a size animal, or just getting that kill, when so many times we start forgetting about those most important things, like you said, family and those experiences. So that's
the journey, man. It's like I killed one of my biggest bucks a couple years ago, and I almost had a feeling that, don't get me wrong, I loved the kill, but the journey for me almost shadows the last 30 seconds of the entire journey.
Yeah, for sure. It's. I mean, think about it. 30 seconds. You said it right there. 30 seconds out of how many days did you hunt? How many weeks? How many months did you prepare for it? You know, the actual kill is such a tiny little part of it, and it's a little bit sad when a guy's hunt is ruined because the animal scored this instead of that.
Yeah.
You know, 2 inches less or 2 inches more. Who cares? It's not about that. It's about, exactly, you said it, it's the journey. It's the adventure. It's the getting there, doing it, and the animal is you know, what the record book says about it or what the tape measure says about it is really truly irrelevant. It's has nothing to do with the hunt, nothing at all.
Yeah. I really hope that, you know, this is a message that hits home with people, and that people can keep in mind this coming hunting season, especially because it's so easy in today's hunting culture to get obsessed with those ancillary things that, in the end, really take away from what's most important. So
sure it is, yeah. And don't get me wrong, and I think all three of us would be remiss if we implied that we wouldn't make an effort to get a bigger buck than what we're seeing right in front of us.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all part of it. And you set your goals, understanding that, you know, the accomplishment is directly proportional to the challenge. So you want to get yourself a 200 class whitetail deer, and that's important to you, then understand you're going to fail on getting the animal that you want, but don't let that ruin your hunt, because you still had the hunt. In fact, you'll be able to hunt longer than almost everybody, because you're never going to be tagged up for at least not in this lifetime. Yeah. So it's, you know, you know, as long as people keep perspective on it, yeah, it's fun, really fun to shoot a big buck. And I love to hunt for a particular buck. For me, that's the challenge nowadays, is I want to hunt that buck. And with the trail cameras out there, you know, stealth camera we use, you know, I have a pretty good idea what's around. So I can hunt a particular buck to the exclusion of all the others, which, again, you know, that's a challenge. But I'm never, ever going to feel that my hunt wasn't a great hunt because I put those constraints on myself to not shoot something. And I didn't shoot anything because I was looking for a particular deer. And it's the same thing for someone who they come up to the north, to Canada, you know, they think 160 and 170 whitetails are behind every tree. They're not. You know, 140 is still a good whitetail in Saskatchewan, Alberta. It is. For an average guy coming for 1 week, yeah, that's a good deer. And if you come in with false expectations and want a certain size deer only, or it's not a great hunt, you'll miss out the beauty of just sitting on the stand watching all the other deer. You know, and you'll be disappointed when you shoot one that's, you know, 142. Why? You know, it's a great deer. You had a great hunt. That's like you said, Dan. It's all part of the journey, and that you know, I think that hunters would be better off, happier, if they could keep that in perspective. And it's hard because look what we show on television, right? We're condensing an entire season into half an hour. Well, yeah, you kill a big deer and you got 10 cameras out there with 10 different guys. You give a false impression that there's those big deer behind every tree, and if you don't get that, it's not a successful hunt. And it's just not true. I mean, hunting is about family, fun, adventure, humor, and big animals are at most, you know, 20% part of any hunt. And really, the kill, 30 seconds, like you say, it's maybe down to about a 0.0001% of a hunt. So it's, you know, that's not the important part.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Yeah. So true. So true. Well, Jim, this has been an awesome conversation. And, you know, for our listeners, if they want to learn more about what you have going on or catch you on TV, you know, where can they go to get that information?
JimShockey.com, or they can Facebook me is probably the best way. I got to get my Facebook numbers up to match Eva's. She's like twice as many people, twice as many fans. What is that all about? Somebody Facebook me and tell me, how can Eva have like 562,899, but who's counting fans?
Oh, jeez.
You know, well, her poor dad is only like half that.
I know. I guess you need to get a Field and Stream cover now, Jim.
Yeah, maybe that sure wouldn't hurt, would it?
Yeah, not at all.
Yeah. I'd be like the 1,899th male that's been on the front cover as opposed to the second female. So
right.
Not quite as significant.
Not quite, I guess.
But yeah, Facebook is probably just as easy as anything, and or our website jimshockey.com. Either way is you can follow along with what we're doing. We're pretty good at keeping posts going on and letting people know where we are, what we're doing.
Excellent. I'll make sure to include links to that in our show notes so that everyone can check those out and catch the new show Uncharted, which looks excellent. And Jim, like I said, this has been a pleasure. So thank you so much for the time and for chatting with us today.
No, it's my pleasure, guys. Appreciate it. Time to take my wife out for sushi now.
Perfect. We'll have a great evening, and thank her for allowing us to borrow you for a little bit here tonight.
She's probably happy with it. I've been home for about 4 days now, so she's already grown tired of me. So she's happy to borrow me out for a few hours. So.
Good deal. Well, best of luck the rest of the season, Jim, and have a good one.
Okay, guys. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Wow. How about that? I just thought that this conversation was terrific. Jim's knowledge of this pursuit is incredible, and his passion for the hunt is truly palpable. I love it. And I hope all of you got as much of a kick out of this interview as I did. And that said, as always, if you enjoyed the show today, we would really appreciate it if you could leave a rating or review on iTunes. It takes less than 3 minutes, and it could help hundreds of new whitetail addicts find this show. And in my opinion, that's a pretty cool thing. So thank you in advance. Speaking of thanks, we'd also like to thank our excellent partners who help make this show possible. Big thanks to Sitka Gear, Trophy Ridge, Bear Archery, Redneck Blinds, Carbon Express Arrows, Hunt Soft, Lacrosse Boots, Big & J Long Range Attractants, and the Whitetail Institute of North America. Also be sure to visit wiredhunt.com/episode 19 to view the show notes and links from today's episode. That said, thank you again, Wired Hunt Nation, for spending some time with us here today. And until next week, keep chasing the dream and stay wired to hunt.